There is a version of non-duality that circulates widely, particularly online, which is in essence a sophisticated rebranding of wishful thinking. It promises relief. It suggests that once you see through the illusion of the separate self, suffering loses its bite. That equanimity becomes your natural state, that you will move through difficulty with serene detachment, untouched by the turbulence that afflicts ordinary people who haven't yet seen what you've seen. This version is not without its appeal, but it is largely useless when you are sitting across from genuine, intractable suffering, whether your own or someone else's. And that is precisely where any understanding worth the name has to hold up. Not on a retreat, not in a comfortable room with like-minded people, but in the places where the difficulty is real and doesn't resolve and shows no sign of resolving. Consider someone who cares for a family member with a serious and chronic illness, a disability, a mental health condition, a degenerative disease. The care systems that are supposed to help are understaffed, poorly managed, and unresponsive. The person you are responsible for is declining. You can see it clearly. You make phone calls that go unanswered. You attend meetings where commitments are made and then quietly abandoned. You advocate, push back, escalate, refuse to accept inadequate outcomes, and still the situation moves slowly or not at all. This is not an abstract scenario. It is lived reality of a significant number of people. And it is precisely the kind of situation that tests whether a non-dual understanding is genuine or merely theoretical. What passes for non-dual understanding in many circles is more accurately described as spiritual bypassing. Reaching for a concept not as a genuine insight, but as a way of not fully meeting what is actually there. Suffering arises, the practitioner reaches for a framework. It's all the Tao, it's all consciousness. There is no one here to suffer, and uses it as an escape hatch. The suffering is real. The framework becomes a way of not fully meeting it. This is not understanding. It is avoidance dressed in the language of understanding. And the test is simple. It doesn't actually work. The suffering persists beneath the conceptual overlay. It surfaces in other ways. The relief the conceptual overlay provides is temporary, and the effort of maintaining it becomes over time more exhausting than honest engagement would have been. Genuine non-dual understanding does not bypass suffering. It meets it without flinching. One of the most practically significant questions this raises, particularly when the suffering belongs to someone else, is how to distinguish between compassion and attachment. They can look identical from the outside. Both involve sustained concern for another person. Both involve action taken on their behalf. But they operate differently, and the difference matters. Attachment to another person's suffering is the mental loop. replaying circumstances, projecting into future scenarios, carrying their pain as though it were your own and could be solved by thinking about it hard enough. This is not compassion, it is suffering about suffering, which adds to the total weight without contributing anything useful to the situation. Compassion is cleaner than that. It sees the situation clearly. It acts where action is possible. It does not withdraw into indifference. That would be its own kind of bypass. But neither does it generate the secondary suffering of the worry loop. It remains present without being consumed. The question is not whether to act in the caregiving situation. You act fully, persistently, without passivity. The question is, what are you doing in the space between actions? Whether you are carrying the situation as a continuous mental weight, replaying conversations, projecting worst case futures, generating suffering about suffering, or whether it is possible to act with complete commitment when action is called for, and then in the intervals to set the weight down. Not in indifference, not in denial, but in the recognition that the compulsive loop of worry is not the same thing as caring and does not help the person you are caring for. There is a naive reading of Taoist thought which suggests that the person who flows with the Tao will be protected from difficulty, that non-resistance eliminates suffering. This is a misreading. The river flows around the rock not because it has achieved understanding, but because that is the nature of water. Winter comes whether you resist it or not. And the point is not that alignment with the Tao keeps winter away. It does not. The point is simpler and more honest than that. Winter is still winter, but you do not have to spend it in a continuous argument with the cold. And here is what genuine understanding actually changes and what it does not. It does not change the situation. The illness is still there. The phone calls still go unanswered. The person you love is still declining. What shifts is whether you add a second layer on top of all that. The suffering caused not by the situation itself, but by the relentless demand that it be otherwise. That second layer can be more depilating than the original difficulty. Most non-duality teaching is addressed to people who are doing reasonably well and want to do better. That is not a criticism. It is simply where the demand is. But the understanding, if it is real, has to extend further than that. It has to hold up where someone you are responsible for is suffering and the systems that should help are failing, where your own health is compromised, where grief is recent and the load is heavy. It will not make those things easy. It does not promise to. What it offers at its most honest is this: that it is possible to carry what has been carried without being perpetually in crisis about the carrying. The weight is real, the carrying is real. Neither of those facts requires the construction of a suffering self on top of them. Whether that is enough is a question only you can answer. But it is a more honest starting point than the version that promises serenity and delivers, at best, a sophisticated avoidance. Thanks for listening.